And the second thing is, and I believe you have a couple DevSCA related updates to share just with the community while we're together, and then we'll swiftly move into the presentation.
Thank you, Jenna, and lovely to see everybody here. So we thought we'd just spend a minute or two. I'm sorry, I have to be admitting people while I talk. So
I'll admit people, so you
thank
can focus
That's
on
great.
talking.
Okay. Yeah, so just a minute or two on what DevSCA has been up to in recent months. I think probably all of us who are on this call are really aware of the terrible consequences of climate change and the need for urgent, really urgent action to stop it becoming catastrophic, and also of the role of developmental science in drawing attention to the threat and to understanding the human development consequences of climate change. So I think that's the thing that binds us here. So we have DevSCA has a steering committee which meets pretty regularly every couple of months. It has members from Europe, from US, South America, India, Africa, and Australia. If anybody who's on this call is interested in playing a part in helping shape our directions, we would love to hear from you. So let us know. So we do have this regular talk series or semi-regular talk series. The next talk will be in December, and Jenna will tell you a bit more about that at the end. But other things we've done in trying to get the message out and to get more of our colleagues engaged and also to support children and families. We were asked to write a blog for the Child and Family blog for the Child and Family Science Global Outreach Corporation. So we've done that recently. There's a special issue of the Journal of Cognition and Development coming out on climate change. It's just about finished. It'll be coming out early next year. We prepared a statement for ISSBD, the International Society for the Study of Behavioural Development, on climate change and about what our roles are as developmental scientists. And that is now on the ISSBD website. There's also a proposal for a special issue of the ISSBD bulletin to feature work that people have underway. If you're interested in participating in that, the deadline is coming up very soon. It's the 15th of October. So have a look at the ISSBD website or contact us if you are interested in contributing to that. Other things we've done in terms of advocacy is we contributed an amicus brief to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which was hearing a request for an advisory opinion requested by Chile and Colombia on what nations' responsibilities were in relation to climate change. And that advisory opinion came out pretty recently and does assert that nations do have a responsibility to address climate change in order to protect their populations and nature. So it's similar to you might know about the International Court of Justice, also came out with a ruling on that way. So it's interesting to see these legal directions with climate change. We also continue to reach out to other developmental science organizations and societies to encourage them to support both research and advocacy on the human development implications of climate change. And we're really keen to hear ideas from members, and we're also really interested in having more people who are interested in human development and climate change to join us. So do get in touch if you have ideas, and do help to spread the word about DevSCA and invite your colleagues and friends to join us. And that's all from me. Jenna, and back to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the updates. Just to let people know that we have been doing things other than organizing the speaker series. So thank you for the update, Anne. Okay, now to move forward with our wonderful presentation, Dr. Nicole Barnes is the Senior Director for Child and Adolescent Learning and Wellbeing at the American Psychological Association, the APA. In this role, she spearheads APA's initiatives to advance cutting-edge applied research to inform educational practices and policies. Dr. Barnes earned her PhD in educational psychology from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, with concentrations in cognition, learning, development, and educational measurement. She began her career as a fifth grade teacher and then transitioned into higher education, serving as a professor of educational psychology and a senior doctoral faculty member at Montclair State University in New Jersey for 13 years. So we are very lucky to have her with us today. And without further ado, Nicole, please take it away.
You so much. What a wonderful introduction. I'm very honored to be with you all this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you're calling in from. And really, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and learn a little bit about our network for resilient pre-K through 12 schools. Can I just have a thumbs up if you can just see my screen? I just want to make sure everything is displaying. Excellent. Okay. So the Network for Resilient Pre-K through 12 Schools is APA's work with 11 other national associations. And our goal here is to really translate science in such a way that we are informing or using it to inform climate resiliency. And we're doing this by helping schools kind of become strong and resilient against the climate challenges. So let me just give you a little overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to kick off with talking about some of the challenges that we face related to climate resiliency and what schools are facing right now globally in trying to do this important work. Then I will kind of pivot a little bit and tell you a little bit about the network, who we are, kind of our goals, why we're doing this work. I'm going to introduce you to a framework that we've developed. This framework is really intended to be kind of a foundational document for us to really guide our work. And we're thinking about ways that schools could use it as well. I'm going to show you how that framework can be put into practice using kind of 3 case studies of climate disasters that have happened in 2025 in the United States. And then I'm going to give you some time to talk and to contribute your feedback to the framework as it's just a draft and the network is still working on it. And then we will close out with telling you about some next steps, what the network is working on, our kind of short-term and long-term plan for the next 1 to 2 years. So let's dig right in. So let's kind of start with talking about why this work matters so much. And a lot of it is going to come down to the numbers here. I mean, just last year in 2024, and many of you probably know this data coming from your own context, that a staggering 242 million students across 85 countries had their schooling disrupted by extreme climate events. Extreme climate events kept 1 out of 7 students out of class. And when students aren't in school because of these events, the ripple effects can be quite serious. For example, we saw from the data anywhere from a 9 to 18% increase in acute illnesses among students. There was a 5 to 15% learning loss. Kids missed out on these kind of like critical instruction and collaborative learning that they needed. And that takes place within schools when students are in class. And about half students reported symptoms of post-traumatic stress, along with some other mental health challenges like anxiety, depression, and increased kind of trouble concentrating. And the trend isn't slowing down. Even though we're still waiting for numbers to come in 2025, we know that some regions globally are seeing even bigger impacts. So let's take Madagascar, for example. The number of affected learners jumped from 59,000 in 2024 to over 260,000 in just the first 4 months of 2025 because of multiple cyclones that hit the area. So the global numbers this year might end up being even higher once we kind of have all of this data in. All of these challenges mean schools, Well, at least from our data, we know that 54% of US public schools are asking for help, especially around climate resiliency and youth mental health. They have told us that existing resources are scattered and not easily accessible. They have told us that they don't know which resources they can trust. And they have told us that resources are not organized in such a way that makes them easy to operationalize. So, while we're thrilled that schools want to become climate resilient, the path forward is anything but simple. As we look ahead to kind of 2026, schools are confronting a complex set of challenges that kind of threaten their ability to protect students and to sustain progress in terms of climate resiliency. Let's talk a little bit about the US and then I'll talk about issues that kind of span the entire world. So, in the US, we're approaching a budget cliff. ESSER funds are gone. The late liquidation grace period ends in 2026. So, that means that schools are no longer going to have the recurring dollars to sustain the upgrades or surge capacity that they built during the pandemic. At the same time, we're seeing an insurance shock. Property risk premiums and deductibles are climbing, and this is putting pressure on schools' operating and capital budgets. Globally, you all know that there is a grid strain. Heat-driven energy peaks are triggering reliability alerts and blackout risks, which means that schools can't count on cooling when they need it most. And even when the power's on, the HVAC reality is tough. We have technician shortages, we have parts delays over the entire world, and we have refrigerant transitions. And they are all slowing down indoor air quality and cooling projects, along with just, keeping up on basic repairs. Some of the new rules that we're putting in place are outpacing old capacity. So, heat safety policies, for example, like New York's temperature thresholds, they're colliding with aging buildings and thinning staffing. So, the result is we have these kind of like disruptive half days that are going on and these weird kind of improvised workarounds that schools are putting into place in order to kind of meet both needs. We're also seeing the impact of compound disasters worldwide. So we're seeing wildfires and floods in 2025, which is just overwhelming schools. Evacuations, smoke and mold exposure, and lengthy testing and remediations are kind of derailing reopenings. And coordination gaps are making things really worse. Mixed responsibilities across alerts, health, utilities, and districts cost valuable time and create failure points when systems are under stress. And then finally, if that all wasn't enough, we have equity pressures. Closures and disruptions hit low income, they hit multilingual, they hit disabled students the hardest. So this really raises the stakes for targeted supports and inclusive planning. Whew. So there is no doubt that the road ahead is full of obstacles. Yet, kind of despite all of these challenges, we keep moving forward. We need to keep moving forward. And this is driven by our commitment to climate resiliency, both for our students and for our communities. So I'm really interested in just taking a second to stop and ask you, using this kind of Slido app, what keeps you committed to advancing climate resiliency for students and for communities, despite the obstacles that we face? You can log in using this QR code with your phone, or in the chat, please use the first link. We're not going to use the second link yet to access Slido in that way. And we'll see what comes up in real time. So excited. Ah, I love it. Yes, please play along, play along. Making a difference, urgency, hope. Yes, hope, duty, health impacts. Love it. Oh, I love hope. Make me cry. Sense of responsibility. Oh, justice and health responsibility. Oh, responsibility, getting hope, coming in strong, helping address. Ah, sense of responsibility, being the hope. I love that. Future generations, responsibility, urgency, helping address inequities, love. Ah, all we need is love. I see two participants typing, one participant type, future generations. We are duty bearers. Oh, lovely. I knew I was going to be amongst my people today. Thanks for being such good sports. Well, we feel the same way. And that is why we formed the Network for Resilient Pre-K through 12 Schools. We know that in these challenging times, it's even more important to leverage collective voices if we want to achieve the outcomes that we know would just not be possible individually. So this is a group of 12 partner associations across three different sectors: education, environment, and health. Hopefully you're going to recognize some of the names on this list. The National Education Association, the American Public Health Association, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Parent Teacher Association, Climate Mental Health Network, Children's Environmental Health Network, the DLR Group, the National Environmental Education Foundation, National Association of School Nurses, Project Drawdown, and us, the American Psychological Association. Our first kind of major milestone as a network was to develop that shared framework that I mentioned earlier. And we call this the 3 Rs framework. And it's really a foundation, it's a guide for our kind of collective efforts to ensure that we're kind of moving forward with the same language and with some kind of clarity and purpose. So this framework is all about how we build real resiliency in schools, and it's centered around 3 Rs, 3 Rs of resiliency: readiness, recovery, and reimagining. So let's take a peek at each. So readiness. Getting schools ready for climate events is not just about having a plan. We know that that doesn't work. It's about making sure that everyone is prepared if there's a plan in place. And that means setting up mental health supports, making sure families are getting the information that they need in their home language, and teaming up with kind of local emergency services to make sure that those services are available when they're needed. We hope that people are engaged in regular drills to help make sure that everyone knows what to do. And we recognize that things like staff turnovers or limited resources can make this really tough, but tackling those challenges is really what we have found is the key to real readiness here. Recovery is all about what happens right after the climate event. So it's about schools kind of jumping into action. Are they activating support services? Are they checking safety equipment? Are they making sure that everybody knows what to do? It's important that recovery is fair. So it needs to meet the needs of every student, every staff member, and every family within the community. So quick checks of buildings and air quality, plus kind of clear communication, help everyone kind of get back to normal as quickly and as smoothly as possible. And then reimagining. Reimagining is all about dreaming. It's about thinking ahead and really getting creative. You know, how can schools kind of weave climate topics into lessons? How can they give teachers innovative training? How do they set up smart policies for long-term sustainability? Upgrading buildings and using new tech to monitor the environment helps everyone stay safe and healthy. And when we reimagine how we do things, we have schools that really support both learning and well-being, kind of no matter what climate challenges come their way. So we've talked about readiness, we've talked about recovery. and we've talked about reimagining. But these ideas are just words on a page unless we see how they could play out in real life. So we're going to take a look at three examples together, US examples. First is the January 2025 Los Angeles wildfires. The second is the June 2025 New York State heat wave. And the third was just recently in August 2025, where Milwaukee experienced kind of very extreme flooding. So, to provide kind of the context for these three events, we're going to watch a short 1 minute video. When it decides that it wants to actually play here.
State of emergency is now in effect in New York. It comes after severe thunderstorms hit several parts of the state, including the North Country. Those storms caused flash flooding and power outages. Now, Governor Kathy Hochul warns of the high heat expected to last through Wednesday.
Across the Los Angeles region, the skies were covered in smoke as fast-growing wildfires spread from winds that gusted to nearly 100 miles per hour. In the foothills of northeast Los Angeles near Pasadena, the Eaton fire started Tuesday evening and grew quickly, prompting emergency evacuations. Multiple active fires burning that are threatening life, limb, and property.
Heavy rainfall in half a dozen Midwest states has led to water rescues, power outages, and road closures. The National Weather Service has issued flood watches and warnings for parts of Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, and Wisconsin. More heavy rain, along with hail, damaging winds, and isolated tornadoes are expected to continue. Among the worst hit is the Milwaukee area, where up to 14 inches of rain fell in some areas.
So kind of let's pull back and look at what we could learn from these three big climate events, the LA wildfires, the New York heat wave, and the Milwaukee floods. Let's start by kind of celebrating what went right. So out in LA, they had phased reopenings. They had environmental testing and they had fast debris removal. And this helped students get back to class quickly. Plus, something for the future is they got an alert system that got a much needed upgrade. So that is all A++. In New York, schools were able to act relatively quickly. They adjusted schedules. They even adopted a new classroom temperature policy that went into effect in 2025. And that was a big step forward kind of for student safety. And in Milwaukee, the community really came together. They did rapid air quality checks. They did tons of asbestos removal and lots of hands-on cleanup so that schools were able to reopen in a manageable amount of time, even after kind of historic flooding. Of course, there's always some tough challenges. So in LA, they faced delays in evacuation alerts. They struggled to keep instruction going, and they saw equity gaps widen, with some students and families just not getting the support that they needed when they needed it. In New York, not every school building had reliable AC, so this meant that there were early dismissals and closures when things got too hot, which hit families without home AC or backup childcare especially hard. And then in Milwaukee, schools were already dealing with kind of aging infrastructure and a lead crisis, so the floods piled on even more financial and logistical strain. And not to mention, the floods happened during a heat wave, making repairs kind of even trickier. So now let's talk about how the 3Rs framework could have supported each of these schooling communities. Let's start with LA. So let's just say that if LA had a remote learning plan ready before the disaster struck, students could have kept learning even when campuses were closed. That's readiness, making sure instruction doesn't stop no matter what. Reimagining means thinking ahead and updating those building policies. If New York districts had reviewed their infrastructure on a kind of consistent timeline to ensure reliable air conditioning, families wouldn't have been left scrambling during heat waves and learning could have continued safely. And recovery is all about removing barriers so that we could have quick repairs. So if Milwaukee schools had a system for rapidly assessing what's slowing down recovery, like getting hydration stations for workers or fast tracking contractor support, they could have bounced back even faster after the floods. So we're hoping that the real value of the 3 Rs is that it would give districts a kind of practical checklist, a way to make sure that kind of nothing falls through the cracks. And that by working through readiness, recovery, and reimagining, kind of schools make sure that they're covering all their bases and they can be confident that they're prepared for whatever comes next. But the 3 Rs is still very much in draft form and it is far from perfect. So that is where you are going to come in. Enough of me talking. Let's hear from you, the real experts. So we're going to break out into some collaborative groups. And in those groups, I'm hoping that you'll work together to give us some feedback on each section of the framework. So if you wouldn't mind, could you take a picture of this slide so that you have the information and the questions readily available when you go out into breakout rooms? And you might also want to, in the chat, open the link to the framework so that you actually have it available to you. So what we're going to do is if you're interested in kind of giving feedback on readiness, please join room 1. If you're interested in recovery, join room 2. And if you're interested in reimagining, join room 3. And in that room, please discuss with each other what parts of the framework do you agree with? What do you feel is accurate, relevant, well-designed for schools? What's not hitting the mark? What do you feel is maybe unrealistic or incomplete? And then what additions or modifications would you make? We'll ask that you just pick a facilitator or scribe to kind of take notes so that you can share your feedback when we come back to the regular room. So I am going to open those rooms now and we'll spend 10 minutes. So it's 9:30. At 9:40, we'll come back to the main room. Is there any questions that I can answer before we break out? You'll want the link to the framework and you'll want the group discussion questions because you won't be able to see them once you go into the breakout room.
Hi, Nicole. It's Kim. Thanks so much. I
Yeah.
think for me, the biggest question, and I was thinking about what this group is mostly working on, is how does this apply to low and middle income countries, and what can
Lovely.
be potentially transferred, what's new, what's different, and what, like you're saying, like what can be augmented here, both for the US, but also potentially what people have learned applying these kinds of ideas in their own context.
Fantastic. Said perfectly, which I'm not surprised. Okay, here we go. Please choose a room.
Hey, I didn't see the link to the breakout rooms. Where was it?
It should have just popped up on your screen.
Oh, okay.
No, it hasn't popped up for me either.
No? Let's see. What room would you like to go to, Anne? I can put you in it.
I would go to room 2.
Okay. Okay, you should be able to go now.
I'm also having the same issue.
Pam, which room would you like to go to?
I'd like to go to room 4.
Oh,
Is
I'm
there
sorry.
only 3 rooms? Oh, it's only 3 rooms. Okay, room
Yes,
3.
3 rooms. Yep, 3 rooms.
3.
Readiness. Yep.
Yeah.
Recovery,
3.
reimagine. Yep.
I'm still having to.
No.
I'm pressing join, but it doesn't seem to be active.
Maybe just try it one more time. There are 2 other people in that room. Anybody else need help going to a room?
Yes, I don't see the option. Would you mind moving me to, I'm
Sure.
Claudia, moving me to room 3?
Sure. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Oh, I'm still here. Or is this room
Okay.
3?
Pam, which room do you want to go to, Pamela?
3. Let me try.
3.
Yeah,
Okay.
3, please. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm
Did
still
that
having
work?
difficulty. It's still not working for me.
Oh, that's weird because now you say you're in room 2. Well, let me try to move you to a different room. Did that work? And popping up for you?
I should just be pressing join.
Yes, just hit join. Yep.
That's what I'm doing, and nothing's happening.
Okay, try again. Do you have a pop-up blocker on, maybe?
I wonder.
Hmm. Well, you can just hang here with us.
I think I might have to.
It
Not such a bad option,
is not. It is not. Room 3, a lot of people are going into room 3.
aren't they? Yes.
Yeah.
And Maston doesn't seem to have joined.
No.
I'm here, but I can't join because I have work people in my house.
Oh.
So they don't, I've been listening and following. It's a really great presentation, but I have
Oh,
to be available. They're,
I totally
they,
get it. I totally get it.
Very strange.
You know what I think it might be, Anne, is that are you not Anne Maston, the other Anne Sanson?
There are lots of
Are
Anns.
you are you listed as a host?
Yes.
That's why.
Okay.
That's what's going on. Because I don't come up either, and I'm
No.
co-host. I don't come up as like being able to just.
Jenna's a co-host, and she's got in.
Oh, okay. So then now my theory is totally incorrect.
I'm not listed anywhere there, so
You're not listed like
that's all
when
right.
it comes up to like participants or anything like that.
Yes. I guess one question I would have
Mm-hmm.
is, I don't know, it's probably a group 2 or 3 thing, but are there limits to resilience if disasters keep on occurring in rapid succession?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the other one that I thought about was, where does supporting kids' mental health fit in this?
Yeah. It's so the mental health supports are in all 3 areas
Okay.
because it's important, just as important as supporting students' physical health to support their mental health. And we also know that it's very linked reciprocally. Um, I think your first question about capacity for districts, if these keep happening over and over and over and in quick succession, is a great question. And I think that's where that reimagining really needs to kind of step up, because if you kind of just only have these short-term solutions that you're putting in and kind of putting band-aids on the problem, but not actually changing infrastructure in such a way to prevent it from happening again, then I don't see how schools with the limited resources that they have could possibly keep up with that
Yeah.
kind of like surge in capacity that would be needed.
Yeah.
But what has been your experience?
Oh, I certainly know here where we've had exactly the same of floods and fires coming in rapid
Yeah.
succession. It has been extremely challenging.
Yeah.
I haven't actually seen analyses of kids' attendance at schools, how long schools have been closed for.
Mm. Hmm.
Or there is some research following kids 10 years after bushfire and showing deficits in learning even 10 years after bushfires.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, so the equity issue is, there are
The
probably some
equity
schools that
issue.
can
Yeah.
throw resources at things and bounce
Yeah.
back. Um,
But
uh,
even those schools, I would probably argue if they're still just like heavily focused on recovery and not on reimagining, then I think over time that would be difficult for them to sustain as well, because it's just so costly when these disasters hit.
yeah.
Um, in my hometown where I taught in Elizabeth, New Jersey, which I lived in for most of my life, they had it wasn't from it wasn't from a disaster, but it was a mold remediation that they had to go through. And students were in like office buildings taking classes for an entire year, and there was no walls, right? So they're just like in these kind of like cubicles, like hundreds of students across an entire floor. And I spoke to teacher friends of mine who lived there, and they just said how disruptive it was and how difficult it was to just get anything done. They could never go outside because there was no playgrounds or anything set up. It was just catastrophic, kind of. And
Yeah.
the same happens, as a result of when it's a natural disaster as well.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
really causes such chaos across like all parts of the system.
Yeah.
And that's why if you only look at kind of one slice without kind of taking into account the whole pie, that's why those don't tend to work well,
Mm.
because it really does affect everything,
Yeah.
all
Well,
parts. Oh, let me
the other
check my time
question
here.
is, I guess I've always pushed hard for climate change education in schools. And
Yeah.
we have a more complex situation in the States than many other countries do.
At the moment, but hopefully the tides will change and maybe we won't have this forever because
I'm
it's
wondering
quite
what you
hard.
think the role of kids understanding what's happening is, and be having some tools to address the causes of climate change, how you think that helps with resilience, if you think it does.
Well, we're very careful at APA to talk about resilience as a structural group phenomenon. Like we try not to say, or at least in our new kind of ways of thinking, we try not to talk about like students developing
Yep.
resiliency against these things, recognizing that so much of it is about like the structures and the communities that they live in, providing the correct supports and structures for them to thrive. Um, but I will say, taking all of that into account, I do feel like it very much depends on the state that you're in, because there are states that are still pushing, climate education very strongly. Like for example, in New Jersey, where I'm from, it's a mandatory part of the curriculum in every grade. So it, it it's very variable, like depending on where you are in the United States. And then
Mm.
there's some states where you can't say the word climate, like
Mm.
you literally can't say it at all. So
Mm.
we do need to be kind of, if we want to help all schools broadly, nationally, globally, we do have to be very careful about like the language that we use and the messaging that we
Yep.
use. If and being sensitive to that. Some people really want to do this work. They're just in environments where they um, are very censored in what they're
Mm.
able to say and what they're able to do. Okay, let me close and bring everybody back. Okay. I want to be sensitive of your time too.
I guess the role of engaging students themselves in the all three of those, having them as active participants.
And do you know, like when you actually listen to students talk about all this, that is really where I feel like hope starts to come through. So you're just like, "Oh, I just love your energy. I love how committed you are to this, how creative they are with their solutions." Uh, my daughter wanted to have like garbage police robots like went around like yelled at beefed at people if they littered and stuff. I mean, it was just it was she was 6 years old and she came up with this, and I was presenting at the White House and she was like, "Can I come tell President Obama about my robots that are gonna like solve climate?" And I just it's those kind of things that I just get so excited about. Get everybody coming back. Thanks so much for playing along. Appreciate your engagement. So just want to be kind of uh very respectful of everybody's time and that we close on time. So can I have a volunteer from each room to kind of give me a what should be improved, what's something that's missing? Because that's the juicy part that we're really hoping you'll be able to help us with. So anybody from room one want to just kind of
So,
talk? Yeah.
yeah, I'll jump in. Hi, everybody.
Thank
Bronwyn.
you. Hi,
Hi.
Ron.
So I had the pleasure of being in the group with Jenna and Francis, and we had a really great conversation. And in terms of our feedback, one of the items raised was the around readiness, was the consideration of the administrative structure of the school systems, whether it's centralized or decentralized. I teach the politics of education, and yeah, it's very real, particularly in moments of threat. And so, a consideration for those precursor conditions that need to be in place for there to be a readiness process
Right.
was
Yeah.
surfaced. And Jenna made it, everyone made great points, but Jenna's point to extend on that was that can bleed over into also thinking about those considerations. It's not just readiness that can be affected, but also the notion of reimagining how to think about what the solutions need to be, that they can be subject to the same towards sorts of systemic political challenges. Jenna, did I have that synopsized? I'm trying to get to the point here. So chime in at any point if I'm off. The other point that was made, Francis raised, was getting more at the pragmatics and thinking about the need to create a ranking system or a ranking approach where there's a ranking of risks and resources. What kinds of areas are vulnerable to different kinds of hazards? So, in some ways, a risk analysis.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can think about different threats for different regions and tailor an adapted plan according to that. And then within that, thinking about readiness, what are those factors that the school system, for example, wants to prioritize? Kids' physical safety, but also about the psychological impact. And then finally, in terms of thinking about staffing, how to do more thinking about what staff needs are to manage attrition. And that's it.
That's fantastic. Anybody from room two?
Yeah, I'm happy to share from room two. This is Emmy Riley. We had a small room, myself and Jen Lansford, but I'll share our thoughts on the recovery section. First off, we really appreciated the attention to mental health and support services. We felt like that was really key, from our developmental focus in supporting children following one of these disasters. We thought one thing about the emergency safety plan section, we thought a lot of that might fit better under the readiness section, actually, of sort of planning ahead of time before the disaster. But perhaps that section could be reframed slightly into emergency safety response, basically like enacting all of those plans. And one thing we thought might be useful to add or encourage schools to think about is connections to the broader community. So a lot of times, in disasters, sometimes we have the community, as Jen mentioned, using the school as like a site for folks, cooling center or whatever it may be. But we could also have the reverse where if the school building is really damaged, maybe there's another community space that could be used to support students and teachers. And so sort of having that mutual connection ahead of time could be helpful to think about in that as well. But then really like making use of those connections during recovery phase. And then I think the other main thing we wanted to mention that could be useful to add was more attention to parents. So we really loved that there was attention to supporting staff in here because that's so important, right? To supporting the students' recovery is making sure that the staff are also have that capacity to support students. But really being thoughtful about involving parents, especially for the mental health and support services, a lot of that is going to be going through the parents. So making sure you're getting in touch with parents in a way that they can get all that information and get it to their students. Yeah. Anything else, Jen, that I missed there?
You did a great summary. Thanks, Emmy.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Room 3.
Hi, it's Kim again. I am happy to report back from our lively discussion. And we started out with a caution about not just taking a framework and plunking it elsewhere. So really thank you for, the idea that people can consider this, and take what they find useful and resonate in their own context. One of the things we talked about with regard to teachers in particular is that there's so much pressure on teachers to do all the things, right? And often it comes from the top down. And the question is, how do you have reimagining happening at the teacher level as opposed to being imposed on them from people who make choices like, oh, we're going to use this framework, or oh, we're going to do this. So it's a question of engagement. We talked a bit about the pastoralist context in Kenya in particular as an example of settings that have very different approaches and needs, and thinking about what this might mean in those contexts about things like how families are able to support their children in school, the nutrition issues, what are schools providing, and that those parts of the ecosystem for students in those settings in many places around the world, really brings in different systems, not just the education system. So that's really important to think about. And then we talked a little bit about data. Whereas in Reimagine, where do the data lie and how can it be used? And especially now in the global context where a lot of the national surveys about how children are doing, their well-being, are going away or have gone away. You can't change policy unless you have great data, and it needs to be more, region, country, and jurisdiction based. And then we talked a little bit about the integration of mental health integration of curriculum and instruction. That's it. Did I miss anything, group? Yay, Meredith, thanks.
Wow. Wow. 10 minutes and look at what you all produce. Can't wait to see what you would do with an hour. This is great. Well, I'm just going to wrap up and tell you a little bit about what's next for the network. So stay tuned for all of this. We have 2 initiatives that we're working on right now. The first is a health advisory report. We hope that this might turn into a series where we focus on all different types of disasters, but we are starting with the risks of extreme heat as our kickoff health advisory report. And this will have kind of 2 main sections to the report. It will have a kind of scientific review of the empirical literature, and then it will move kind of into some evidence-based recommendations specifically for extreme heat resiliency. And the second thing that we're doing as a network is that we're going to fund a grant competition. So we're pooling kind of our funds together to make sure that we're supporting the continuation of empirical research. And we are specifically looking for folks that want to detangle like the interrelationships between exposure to climate disaster, eco-anxiety, mental health concerns, and then linking that all to learning outcomes. Since when we try to argue for um, increased supports on a national level, this is usually where we hit the kind of roadblock is when we get the question, well, how is this directly affecting learning? So those are on the horizon for the group. But that is all I have for today. Thank you for being such a great audience and for playing along so well in all the activities. And happy to take a couple of questions. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Does anyone have a question? We have maybe time for one or two questions.
I have a really basic question. This is the first time I've managed to join one of these seminars because of the timing. And I know every different time zone is involved, and I think that's wonderful. But I noticed that you're recording. Are the previous seminars available somewhere?
Yes, we email them out and they're also on our website. I can send a link in the chat.
Fantastic. Yes, Brannon.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for this really great presentation. I really appreciate it. And the framework is really helpful. And I'll be following up for sure. One quick question that came up for me is FEMA had a program, actually had a grant program to bring the social sciences into social science research into disaster recovery. Those funds, I think, were canceled as part of other initiatives, but I wanted to get a sense if you all have sought out any findings from any of the research that did come from that funding program. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
We have not. Has anybody else on the call used any of the research that came out of FEMA? I did not see that kind of blasted out, and I do usually get updates from that. Well, I was getting updates from that group before it was dismantled, but I haven't seen anything come out in a while, but perhaps others on the call have. No, it's very unfortunate kind of what's going on in the United States right now, and us trying to do this work in the political environment that we're in. But we keep trying, and there are some really positive and hopeful moments that are happening, especially at the state level. So what we can't do at a national level, we are still making inroads at state levels, and so I think that there's where the hope lies. And some of the money too, I might say, like, is at the state level.
Yeah. Well, this is very helpful. And I'm at WashU in St. Louis, and in May, there were tornadoes that hit the metropolitan area and hit the poorest neighborhoods. And so it's combined with school closures. So this is very apropos. So thank you.
Oh, good. Oh, I'm not glad that you're having those disasters, but I'm glad that it was helpful given the circumstance. Yes, Francis, please.
Hi, thanks for the really interesting presentation. Quick question about the funding. Since it's the APA, would it be available to applicants in other parts of the world, especially low and middle income countries, or would you say it would mostly be earmarked for US-based work?
No, it would be open to a global community researchers. We would like to see really teams of researchers that are both interdisciplinary and kind of globally diverse kind of coming together. That would be, I think, ideal, though we wouldn't exclude somebody that didn't meet that. But I think that would be really interesting in terms of the findings that would come out of that kind of work.
Yeah, nice. Could you notify the group somehow about
Yeah.
when the funding's announced so that we could
Yes, I will. Kim is my very good friend and colleague, and she's part of your group, and so
Okay.
she will be aware. And we're hoping
Okay.
that call will come out like Q2 of 2026.
Nice. Okay. And one last question: would you fund qual, quant, and mixed method, or is there a?
Oh yeah, yes, we
Cool. Okay.
appreciate all types of inquiry and
Great. Thanks a
encourage it
lot.
all. Of course. Thanks for asking. Yes, Anne, please.
Yes, this is more of a comment than a question, but really helping to support those sorts of collaborations is really one of the main goals of DevSCA. So it'd be wonderful if a bunch of our members could get together to respond to these
see, that would be fantastic. That's exactly what we would like to see.
Thanks.
Well, I know Jenna wanted to say a couple of things before we closed out, but again, thank you for being a great audience. It was really an honor to be with you this morning. Take care.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Again, yes, round of applause. Also impeccable timing. I have just one thing to say, which is that our next meeting will be in December, more specifically on December 11th. So we will send out an invitation and more details about that presentation. And I hope you all can make it. And thank you again to Nicole for this wonderful presentation. Hope to see you all next time.
Bye, everybody.